Hey, I'm Tommy, and filmmaking equipment can get really expensive really fast, particularly the lighting. A single large light source can cost thousands of dollars, particularly if it has full RGB color and a set of effects. And you rarely need just one light to achieve the look you want, in spite of what thousands of YouTube videos will tell you, like Hollywood film lit with just a box of matches or something. For example, in this video, I'm currently using 4 lights just to light me, and then I have this light as the 5th light. I usually use 6 lights, I have 2 in the background for color. And that's just a room in my house that I use for YouTube videos. In addition to that, professional lighting is usually a very unforgivingly, you get what you pay for industry in practice. Well, this is the Ikan Onyx. It is a large 2x1 soft RGBWW panel, meaning it has red, green, blue, daylight, and tungsten colored LED chips. And it's a soft, diffused light source, roughly 2 feet by 1 foot in size. And that's what made the Ikan Onyx interesting to me, because usually lights in this style with 5 colored LED chips cost between $2,500 and $7,000. For example, this right here is the Lupo Super Panel Full Color 60, and it's a 2x1 panel in the same factor, and it costs $2,600. And the RE Sky Panel S60C, for example, costs $6,500. And the RE is only RGBW, meaning this one has more accurate color in both the daylight and the tungsten color range. I mean, it should anyways, we'll measure it. This one also comes with a grid, which usually would cost an extra couple $100. My questions are, what really are we getting for $900? And what corners have been cut? And could this work as a more affordable option in a professional or even a personal setting like a YouTube studio? Is this something that I would recommend for you guys? Well, let's find out. Right off the bat, the build quality is pretty cheap. There's some aluminum and some plastic, and it doesn't really seem like it would last a really long time if it were put through a few demanding trips. This light seems like it's really meant to just be put up in a studio and then just kind of stay there. I mean, if you're hauling this around a lot, I think I'd be most concerned about this handle ripping or breaking. It's made of plastic and it's supporting the whole weight. Shaking it around makes a couple of weird noises, but I mean, that's to be expected. And the grid, while it's an essential thing to have for a large light like this, it's almost too small to fit on the light itself. I mean, I can hear the corners ripping and tearing as I try and put it on the light, which is not an elegant process. There's also a ton of Velcro straps on the back, which seems kind of excessive. And they can get in the way and are kind of annoying when you're trying to put it on the light. I think this could have been a much better accessory if it were designed to fit a little bit better and only had elastic straps or tiny magnets attaching it around the corners instead of like all these Velcro straps. So I'm definitely hoping they improve it with version 2 of this light. You'll dread every time you have to take this thing off because you know that eventually you'll have to put it back on. But it's nice and controlled now, and the grid, once it is finally installed, does work pretty well. And it will be saving you a couple $100 as opposed to having to buy something from like Dop Choice, which is the whole premise of this review, you know, saving money. But I would be really irritated if that grid was something I had to buy. It doesn't come with anything else other than the power cable and the power adapter AC brick, which loosely attaches to the back of the unit with Velcro straps on this plastic sled thing. And the adapter provides 48 volts at 160 watts using 4-pin XLR for power delivery. Now, I couldn't find any other 4-pin XLR power delivery options available for this light, and it doesn't look like there's any V-mount options available even on their product page when you can see them doing an outdoor shooting scene with power strips dangling off of this light. So I don't think that this is intended to be battery powered ever. But perhaps the worst thing about this light are the obvious sacrifices made to the user interface, and not just in the way it's designed, but the way you physically have to navigate it. The knobs here are made really way too smooth and have grooves going in the wrong direction, causing your fingers to constantly slip when trying to rotate them. It requires additional squeezing tension. It's just not comfortable. My best guess is these knob fittings were 3D printed, but there's an easy fix. You can just get some gaff tape or some electrical tape or silicone tape and just wrap it around the knobs, and that problem won't exist anymore. Or if you're in a hurry, you can just rip the knobs off and replace them later for just a buck or two and some patience, and just rotate the little metal knobs on the back and until you get those. The other issue here is the actual firmware. There's a few issues that make this light really irritating, and then a few other issues that just make it downright impossible to use in a variety of different settings. But there is hope. If they work on the firmware and change these few little settings, which seems like it would be totally possible, it would become an extremely valuable tool for filmmakers, and it would be worth the money. But you'll probably need to wait for them to release this firmware and announce it before you actually buy it, because there's no way to actually upgrade the firmware yourself. There's no USB interface. The first problem is in CCT mode, you first have to pick your color and then switch over to CCT correction mode to adjust the green or magenta. Now, I don't usually use green or magenta, I just leave it at 0. In my opinion, you should really be able to tap color RGB knob to toggle between picking your color temperature and picking the green magenta shift. That should all be on one option. And then 2, in gels mode, the saturation is just adding RGB white to an RGB preset. And it doesn't take into account that adding white or saturation into that color will also increase the intensity, so your exposure will change. And the biggest problem is there's no intensity setting whatsoever on gels mode. This is at 100% all the time at full blast. I almost never use my lights at 100% power, so this is practically unusable for me as is. And finally, the RGB mode, which is arguably the most important mode for lights like this, is completely lackluster the way they've designed it. Here we go, RGB mode right now. It starts in hue wheel mode, where turning this wheel, the hue wheel, will adjust the color around 360 degrees of the color wheel. But there's no way to configure saturation or intensity. It's just 100% intense, fully saturated all the time. Now, by clicking the left knob, you enter into RGB mode, where you can then control the individual red, green, and blue colors with the knob on the right. And to toggle between those colors, and if you go to 0, it jumps over to 255. But to toggle between the different colors, right now I'm on blue, you have to then tap the knob on the left. So you can toggle between all the different colors there. Say I wanted a purple, and control the blue. Oh, don't turn the hue knob, because if you turn the left knob instead of tapping it, then you'll go back to 100% intensity full blast, whatever your previous hue color was. For some reason, when you scroll the hue wheel too far to the left also, it just goes into a completely saturated white mode, and I think something's off with their math in the firmware. There it is. See? All I did was turn the hue wheel to the left a little while, and then it just goes totally saturated white. And to get it back, I have to turn all the way to the right again. It's kind of weird. Now, there are a few common special effects in special effects mode. I mean, I don't think the police mode was, done correctly. It's 2 red flashes and then 1 long blue flash. I've never seen a police car that flashes quite like that. What I'm surprised about is how ICANN did their lightning. It looks more like real lightning than any other special effects lightning mode that I've seen on these RGB lights. It cycles through after, 5-10 seconds, it'll do it again, but you can also toggle it with the select button. I think it looks really good, and I like how the color temperature changes a little bit between each of the flashes. I think they did a really good job with their lightning mode. I'll give them credit for that. Now the fan, it has a fan built in there. I just turned it on, but it has a physical switch to actually disable the fan. Disabling the fan doesn't make the light any less intense or reduce the maximum intensity. I don't see any real need to have the fan turned on in the first place. The light does get kind of warm, and if you have the fan disabled for an hour, it'll turn the light off. But there's no way to know how long until the light turns off or what the temperature is at after you disable the fan. So I just usually leave it turned off. Now I'm being lit up by the Ikan Onyx 2x1. It's the only light that's lighting me right now, but I prefer to also have like kind of a rim light. So I'm gonna throw in the Aperture 120D Mark II with the Fresnel attachment. And this is what I'm able to create. I've got the Ikan Onyx down at like 12 or 13% power? 12% power. You have granular adjustments down to 10%. I've got the grid attached right now. Let's see what happens if we take this grid off. And that's without making any adjustments, taking the grid off. You can see that the grid does cut quite a bit of light out. I think I might even be overexposed now. And let's see what it looks like without the 120D Mark II. So this is obviously the only light that I've got right now. So I'm gonna try something else now. This light isn't very heavy, so I'm going to use this piece, this little gobo head off of the C-stands that I have, and I'm gonna mount it vertically. There we go. Now I have it mounted vertically, and I think it looks a little bit better, kind of like that. Let's throw in that backlight there with the 120D Mark II. All right, so now I'm wondering what the photometrics are, CRI, TLCI, and all that business. So let's run some measurements. The maximum output I was getting from 1 meter away was about 2800 lux at 4500 Kelvin. The CRI was only 93.6, but the TLCI was 99. So clearly there's some color issues there. For RGB output, I usually measure the red, and in this case I was getting 806 lux from 1 meter away. I also measured it at 5600 Kelvin at 10% power and noticed it was really magenta, so I corrected it and then I went up to 100% power, and then the color shifted way onto the green side. So as you switch intensity, there's a huge color shift. And the light passed the flicker test, so you can use it at any frame rate. So is this light worth the money, $900? Well, I mean, it can be if they make those firmware updates. If they do, then absolutely. It'll be a great panel for the money, and it'll be a huge value for anyone that's looking for a lot of color in an affordable package and a nice big soft surface that they don't have to put any diffusion in front of. Otherwise, I couldn't recommend it in its current state. I just think there's too many limitations on how it can be used and too many sacrifices into the build quality. So I've got a huge showdown coming up with 7 different brands of 1x1 RGBWW panels to see which of them is the best value. So if you like videos like this one, light up that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.